Hey, everybody. Jim Klauck here on Contractors Stories. On my podcast, we do a deep dive into the contractor. We want to hear their story, their backstory. Teo Bogdan's joining me today, and his story is, well, maybe a long story, but what we're talking about today is kind of a short story. He got into a home service business and he was able to exit the business, I don't think long after. And he's not even from here. So, everyone who complains about how, it's hard to make money in America and do this, I love talking to immigrants. And we have one here today. Teo, welcome to the program. It's good to have you, buddy.
Thank you for having me, Jim. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, let's start back when you were a boy. You moved here to the United States. You're in the Detroit area and you came from Romania. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. When I was 10 years old, couldn't speak any English at all.
And I'm sure you came over with your parents.
Yeah. Yep. My parents won I think it was called the lottery or whatever. And
Yeah.
then we moved here, so yeah.
And could they speak English?
They could speak a little English. They had a lot of, they were taking, I think, ESL classes in the evenings. So
And I'm sure growing up, because you were young, you obviously were assimilated into the American culture and the American way of life, but I'm sure your parents said, "Hey, by the way, this is the lottery. Like this is a golden ticket for us. We won the lottery. We got here. Son, do you realize how good this is?" So do you really appreciate what you have here in America?
oh, yeah, at the 110%. So every time, my parents would talk to me and, we'd go through some hardship or whatever, they'd always be like, "We did this and we came here for you to have a bigger opportunity," and I'd appreciate that, with all my heart.
The American dream. I tell a lot of people who are born here in the United States that they were born with an advantage. Um, a golden ticket. If you're born in the US, even if your parents weren't, okay, if you're born in the US, you're an American citizen. An American citizen, no matter what anyone says, is really at the top of the economic heap, arguably, one of the best places on earth to live and to start a business, even to be employed, medical care, safety. You don't have to worry about your government, killing you. Um, so it's an amazing place to be, and I don't think a lot of people really appreciate what they're born with. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think as Americans, you probably like at being born here and an American, you don't know how bad it is in other places. Our country was communist up until when I was born, so I could hear what my grandparents and my parents told me about like the revolution and how they had to stand in line for hours and hours for a piece of bread and a little cheese, or how they would save every single bag and like literally everything
Mhm.
because they might use it sometime along the way. So I really appreciate America. And when things aren't going right, or weird things are happening, it kind of like hurts my heart, because where else are we able to go to build what America is? Right? Nowhere. Like this is what we got, so we got to take care of it.
Absolutely, and you're living the American dream. You're an entrepreneur, a business owner in the trades, which I love. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in 2024, you bought a business and you exited the business in 2026. Is that correct?
Yeah, so about a month ago is when I
Yeah.
actually exited. Yeah.
All right, so take us along the journey of you getting into the business, running the business, and then exiting the business. Why did you buy it? What were you doing in it? And why did you get out of it?
Yeah, so to kinda backstep a little bit, I was originally an engineer. I went to college, got my engineering degree, then started investing in real estate. Long story short, about 3 years ago, we kinda hit a wall with being able to acquire properties, and we still had, like, a good amount of holdings. So we're like, "Hey, let's vertically integrate, get some trade companies under us. Since we manage all our own properties, it'd be a smart move." So the way it kind of happened was, we were looking for HVAC companies, and we were actually raising money for a building we were buying from an HVAC owner.
Mm.
And we're like, hey, let's pick his kind of brain on this one other HVAC company we were looking at. And he's like, yeah, you don't want to buy that. That's too small. This guy's gonna, kind of screw you over as soon as, you get into it. And he's like, you should maybe look at buying mine. So that's essentially how the opportunity presented itself.
Yeah. And so in the HVAC business, something you probably weren't familiar with running an HVAC business, um, ran it, and then you got out of the business. You basically took an exit. Why did you exit the company?
So it was kind of a unconventional and weird how it happened. So when we bought the business, it was sub $1 million, and a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So I figured, hey, we're gonna get in there, just throw a bunch of marketing at it. He's already got the experience, he's got the techs, everything's gonna be wonderful. We're gonna be rolling, right? So
Yeah.
first year, we threw the marketing at it, and as you may expect, it was complete chaos because
Mm.
there were no systems, no processes. We went from writing invoices on a piece of paper to having software and getting the current employees to use that software and then figuring out systems to not have callbacks. And it was just chaos. The first year was just insanity. Um, and then that was 2024. And then 2025, we kind of restructured some things, set in some processes and systems, and kind of kept on with the marketing, and kind of kept trying to grow. But we ended up losing money in 2025 because, after joining HSF, we weren't paying close enough attention to our numbers, like our
Mhm.
KPIs for how well we were answering calls, our turnovers, our average cost per ticket, like all those things were just, I was running through walls and I wasn't paying attention to the little things that really matter. Um, so then, fast forward, joining HSF, working with the guys in there, and they're like, hey, you know, what's your, what should you be charging an hour? And I told them, and they're like, how? That's way too low. So they're like, they give you a sheet and they're like, fill this out, figure it out. And I was like, wow, no wonder we lost money. Like we're like, it caught, like, for example, we were charging 125 an hour. Our all-in, like, break-even cost was, like, 178, so we're losing essentially, like, $50 every hour per employee. So it's just like, "Oh, that's why," right?
Yeah.
Um, so, from then, we redid the whole price structure, we did kind of fixed everything that had to do with that, and then we're like, "Alright, we need more marketing," and it's like, "No, how good are you at answering your phones? How good are you at booking the calls?" Well, again, to no surprise, we're booking calls at, like, 30%. LSA leads are very expensive, mostly at only booking them at 30%. So then it's like, "Okay, here's a call flow, follow this call flow." So we upped our booking. So, with the same marketing, you go from 30 to 60%, you're doubling your revenue.
Mhm.
So, little things like that, really helped us to, this year they're on track to do 3 million with, essentially like a 15 to 18% EBITDA, which is really, really well, really good, mostly from kind of where we started. Um,
Yeah. Great, great story. Um, Home service freedom, you were introduced to that a year ago, I guess, right? Back in
yeah.
2025, you went to the Home Service Freedom Conference in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
and you came out of that probably, I'm guessing, with your head kinda spinning in a good way, right? You're like, "Whoa, this is great," and then you started applying Home Service Freedom because you joined, right? So you joined
Yeah.
and and they were to help you along. Would you recommend Home Service Freedom to any home service company, whether they're doing 250,000 a year or 25,000,000?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm,
When I bought the company, I figured I was buying a lot more knowledge,
mm,
and since it was such a mom and pop shop, I did buy a lot of technical knowledge, but not a lot of, like, the business knowledge you want when you want to grow and scale, you know? So being an HSF, instead of, you know, let's say there was something I had to figure out. Before, I'd have to do a bunch of research. I'd have to look here, look there, and then kind of decide on what the best track would be, right? Being part of HSF, I'd be like, hey, either, you know, the advisors or other people in the group, I'd be like, hey, what do you guys do here? And they'd be like, do this. And it's like, sweet. And you're boom, you implement it and you're rolling instead of wasting months and time to figure it out on your own, right? You already have the solutions there because
Sure.
people have already gone through it.
So Tio, and this is gonna sound like I'm dumbing it down with home service freedom, but I don't think I'm not. It's kind of a compliment, actually, I believe. When YouTube came out, if you needed to do something at home, a project which you've never done before, maybe it's installing a toilet, right? You
Mhm.
go to YouTube and they have the answer, right? If you need to understand how to wire a three-way switch in your house and you go to YouTube, someone's done it, electricians and maybe some, handyman or, a do-it-yourselfer. So going to home service freedom is kind of the same thing. They've already done it, right?
Yep.
And you're just learning from it. So it's kind of the same thing, right? They have the knowledge and experience. And I'll tell you, I give you a lot of credit because a lot of people who are in business for themselves, in other words, they either start a business or they go into business. A lot of people are arrogant, they have too much pride, they think they know everything, and they're like, "I don't need to read books, I don't need to go to conferences, I don't need YouTube videos, I don't need mentors or coaches, I know what I'm doing." And it's not true. I always say even Tiger Woods has a coach.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's
Right?
true. That's very
Right?
true.
And, so I give you a lot of credit for that. Okay, so you bought the company in 2024, you exit July 2026. You're now unemployed. I'm joking. So what you're retired, right, at a young age.
Yeah.
Now what are you gonna do? What's your next step?
I'm looking for another business, something in the trades, something that, you know, in a short 5 to 6 months, I was able to figure out, you know, all the holes in the bucket essentially with the business, plug those holes as best as I could and, you know, turn everything around to make it profitable and generate much more income. So, now my next step is kind of finding that other company, hopefully like a bigger size company where I
Mhm.
can kind of do the same thing is kind of buy something that's, you know, maybe has the sales, but maybe it needs a bunch of holes plugged in the bucket so that way, you know, revenue's not leaking everywhere.
Yeah, so it's like real estate. You're looking for a distressed property, not a total tear down, but you wanna renovate it,
Exactly.
right? So the foundation's okay, but you need to really strip stuff down to the studs maybe, but that's okay because you're gonna get it at a good sale price, and
Exactly.
then you're gonna move forward. So maybe they've got a good customer base, I don't know, maybe they've got some equipment and stuff, that's not a big deal,
Yeah.
depending upon the size, and maybe they've got some good talent in there that you can make better, and of course, you always have to get rid of some and bring others in, but at least you know how to renovate, if you will, that company. So, it's almost like it sounds like the first deal you did was like a flip, right? It's a property, an HVAC company. You come in,
Yeah.
you kinda put carpet down and paint it and you put a new roof on it, and you're like, a couple years later, flip it. So it's almost like that. Do you plan on continuing to do that, or do you wanna hold on to these? What's the future look like in that regard?
Yeah, so it's funny how you kinda related to real estate because that's what I did in real estate, right? Between
Yeah.
houses and multifamily and mixed use and all the stuff that I did is we would find a property that was run down and needed work, we'd fix it up and rent it up and then keep it, right?
Mhm.
Or if the right offer came around, you would sell it, right? So it's probably one of those things where it's like you find it, fix it, make it nice, make it a nice place to work, and either keep scaling it and growing or, you know, exit it if the right person comes along to that wants to buy it.
Tia, where does the capital come from? If you're in the market for let's say an HVAC company. Maybe it's an
Mhm.
HVAC, electrical, plumbing company, what I call the trifecta. People love to, add on to what they've got. Those are the big mechanicals in the house, those 3. So and it's gonna be a larger company than the one you exited. Do you have millions of dollars in the bank, or do you get outside funding? I mean, where's this money coming from for you to do this?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the side of the purchase, right? I've
Mhm.
been fortunate enough and I've done really well in real estate. So that's kind of afforded me to buy a certain size. And then if not, I'm used to being able to raise money from investors on, a bigger purchase and kind of like syndicate a deal or, just conventional bank financing would work too. Or an SBA loan.
Sure.
There's multiple ways of kind of filling that gap.
As a business owner, would you rather finance it yourself, have a partner, an investor, or a bank? Because 'Cause they're all different. The bank's a little more hands off, even though they have, a lien on it, if you will. I mean, it's right, they're gonna go after as collateral. If you finance it, your cash is in it, so now you don't have enough cash to do other things maybe. Then if you have an investor, it's a partner now. So, which is the best one in general? I know it's gonna depend on the deal, but in general, what would you rather do?
Yeah, I mean, each have pros and cons. I would rather just finance it all myself because then it's all on my back
Mhm.
and you're kind of more kind of strapped to it. And it's like, you're putting everything on the line, you got more to lose. Um, Having partners can be very, very good or a huge pain in the butt. Right? So that's, it's risk reward sort of thing. I would say I would much rather finance it all myself, and be the only person that's kind of, I have to answer to, not a partner or a bank. But sometimes if you get, favorable bank financing, it'd be great too. Or if it's a partner that brings something else to the table, that would also be beneficial.
I agree, depending upon the deal, all 3 could be viable for that specific thing, and actually, I'd recommend at some point people to try all 3 to figure out how bad some are because, sometimes it's, challenging when you get into bed with an investor and they're very active when you didn't think they were going to be. A bank's not gonna be
Yeah.
active really. A bank's gonna say, "Hey,
Yeah.
here are the rules. We want our money back. Run the business." Well, it's kinda like a mortgage on a house.
Hmm.
Almost everyone who says they own a house really is in partnership with the bank. They say they own a house, but it's not true, the bank does. But in any case,
Right.
you know that. The bank owns the house, down to that last payment. But in any case, the bank is generally a silent partner until you don't pay your mortgage. And then
Hmm.
they kinda wake up and say, "Hey, by the way, it's been 3 months, where's the money?" And you're like, It's not gonna come." "Alright, then, we're foreclosing. We're taking our house, but we don't want
Yeah.
to. We'd really rather have you pay. We don't want the house, but if we have to, we have to." And so that's
Yeah.
really kinda like a silent financial partner. Other ones can be like, all of a sudden they're moving in. You're like, "Whoa, wait,
Hmm.
wait, you tell me how to." "Yeah, I just gave you a bunch of money. We're partners." Oh my gosh. So,
Yeah.
like private equity, that's a big deal, right? So, I've heard a lot of stories about companies who went the PE route and they didn't expect things to change so much, and they're like, "You know what? I wish I could just have sold this to someone so I could be on the beach because now I'm working in the business, I got a
Yeah.
deal to work in the business, and these guys are brutal." Have you ever dealt with that type of situation?
I haven't had to deal with that. I've interviewed. It was funny. There was a company locally to us that got acquired by PE. First day they came in and just changed everything, and essentially 3/4 of their employees just walked out. And it was just like free range season for me because I was like, "Why is everyone leaving?" And then when I was interviewing, they were telling me the whole story.
Yeah.
So it was just like it was great for us because we were kind of getting those really good employees that, you know, didn't like how things changed over there.
Yeah, I hear a lot of those stories. People get used to a culture.
Mhm.
It's like a family for a lot of these smaller companies. They're just big enough for PE to acquire in some instances. And all of a sudden it becomes very, very corporate. That corporate, the PE corporate, for better or for worse. we don't need to get into an extensive discussion about it because there are often two sides to it, and
For sure.
it's it's happening a lot in the home service space as it is in many sectors, but, a lot in the home service space, and, for those of you who are watching this now, if you haven't been, um, confronted by a PE company, you will be if you're doing something well, if you pique their interest, and could be something you might wanna do if you don't wanna continue doing what you're doing because
Yeah.
you're not gonna wanna stay there. Um, AI is everywhere now. People are using it to figure out the best, fried chicken recipe, all the way to having these, you know, AI employees and AI doing so much in the business and CSRs and so forth. It's changed a lot in 2 years. So when you started in 2024 with your HVAC business, AI wasn't where it is today. Going forward, though, are you thinking about, gosh, when I'm into that next home service business, I'm going to be applying AI where I didn't before?
Yeah, definitely. So we used it, but we used it on the back end,
Hmm.
right? A lot of companies in our space were using it on the customer facing side where they answer phones on the weekends, after hours, all that stuff. We always had live answering, and we actually received a lot of reviews because people are like, "Hey, out of all the places that we called, these were the only guys that answered. They were nice, they were friendly, they, heard us out." Where, I think people still really want to talk to people. Most people do, mostly when they're having, their toilets backed up or their AC is not working or something along those lines. So, we tried really hard to keep that customer facing side with people. And then we used AI on the backside to kind of optimize, um, you know, a lot of the things where people might drop the ball on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. AI is getting a little scary where I think a lot of business owners are feeling too secure with it and giving it a lot of credit, and then sometimes having to retreat a bit, saying, maybe we weren't ready to move all of our CSRs to AI CSRs. Um, People, I believe, except for the strange ones, wanna have a human to human relationship, and I say strange ones because, and if I'm offending you, I'm sorry out there, but there are people who have relationships with AIs, AI girlfriends, AI boyfriends, AI whatever. They'll never be able to touch them and hug them, and but, so AI and technology isn't moving fast enough where we're going to change our DNA, who we are, right? We want to have human experiences. I believe the companies that can be as human as possible will do the best. I'm also assuming a lot of your customers that you wanted, your ideal ones, were 40, 45, 55, 65, 70 years old, right?
Yep.
Well, the old timers, they really want that human touch because they didn't grow up with the internet. They didn't grow up with apps. They didn't grow up with smartphones. They didn't grow up with that technology. So
Yeah.
I think it's wise to have humans answer the phone and have the best human you can, ones that aren't cranky, ones that aren't tired, and ones that answer the phone with a smile, right?
100%. We had little mirrors on everyone's computers that said smile. They can hear you through the phone. So that was a big thing.
That's smart. For those home service companies, those contractors that are listening and watching right now who are behind you, and there's a lot of them. I always say there's this like pyramid, right? At the top, you've got like $10 million a year companies plus a lot in the half a million, 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million, kind of at the bottom of the pyramid. So there's a lot of companies there. Some people are self-employed. What advice can you give them? Because you were there not that long ago, right? I mean, you've done a lot in the past, 2, 3 years. So, any advice for the people who are just starting or who are stuck at, like, the $1.5 million mark?
Yeah, I mean, being through it, I kind of realized that's like the worst place to be almost. right? Because you have enough where it's like you can afford one person, but you don't have enough to have two, and that's what
Mhm.
you really need, right? So it's like, that saying goes, if you have one, you need another. So if you have one sales guy, you need another. If you have one senior, really good tech, you need another two or three. If you have one CSR, you need another. Because, one of those people leaves or are sick and like everything blows up, right?
Mm.
So I think that's, sometimes kind of taking that leap and getting another sales guy, getting another or getting, that next key person, even though it's a big step and it's like, this might not work out. That's probably what you need to get to the next step and keep moving forward and keep growing.
So, Teo, that's the problem. The problem is jumping 100%. So, you've got a mom and pop operation, one truck, one technician, which is the owner, and Mrs. Owner, who answers the phone and does the books. Mom and pop operator. So now they want to grow. When they add one more truck, one more technician, it's almost 100% more of everything.
Mhm.
Another truck, another mouth to feed. And as the business owner slash technician, you're kind of set in your ways. Now you're hiring someone who is not doing it the way you do it. And you've been doing it for 15 years and you decided to expand your business and this new tech is younger, doesn't listen to you, they're, yada, yada, yada. And so you're taking really one step forward and two steps back. You're actually losing money now for a period of time. And then you're like, let me lose more money because I need another tech. Because if this tech doesn't show up, who's gonna, who's gonna take on the calls? Because we're spending more money in advertising and marketing. Once again, another step back. So it can really be tough when you start to grow versus if you're at 50 trucks and you go to 60 trucks, way easier than one truck to two truck. Wouldn't you agree?
100%,
Mm.
110%.
Yeah. That's That's tough. That's why I think we see so many, and we see them at these conferences a lot.
Mhm.
They wanna know what the secret sauce is on how to become a $20 million plumbing company, electrical or HVAC company. They've been doing this for 15 years, and they're still under $2 million. They grew a lot in the first 3 years, but they plateaued, and they're like, "Can't get there. Every time we step out of our comfort zone, we get smacked." But you're gonna get smacked, right?
Yep, always.
So, what can you do to not get smacked? Like, bring in financial partners, coaches, all of the above? I mean, how do you get over the hump?
Yeah, I think coaches, that's what really helped me because, you come to this intersection, it's like, all right, do you need a service manager or another service technician? And you don't know, right? Because you've never been there, right? But when you have someone to kind of coach you and guide you, like, the guys at HSF, I'd be like, hey, here's where I'm at. This is where I'm going. What's my next best hire? What would you recommend? If they're like, do that. Cool, perfect. And then they tell you, here's why. And then you bring on this next person when you get to here. So just having that guidance kind of takes a lot of that guesswork out and, helps you be more confident in your decision instead of like, I don't know, you know?
Yeah, and one thing I really love about coaching and being mentored by people who've gone through it, right? So,
Mhm,
this has to be someone who just didn't read a book, right? I mean, you wanna have a coach and mentor who've actually been in the trenches.
mhm.
It's great going down that route for me personally, I think, versus I'm gonna buy into it and bring a partner in who was in the trenches. And I say this because partnerships are difficult. They are. Partnerships in business are more likely to split than you and the missus. And divorces are very high in the marriage world. They say
Mm.
almost 50% of people who get married get split. I would say it's a little higher for people who go into business together. My point to this is if you can find capital somewhere where you're not necessarily partnered, where they're not like saying, "Hey, half of this is mine and I'm here today and we're both sitting at the same desk." And if you can then get great mentoring and coaching, and then you're in control, I think you can sleep better at night, because there's always arguments I find in partnerships. What experience do you have in that field where you've been in a relationship in business, we call it a partnership, where you're like, "This isn't working out. I gotta buy you out or you gotta buy me out." Has that happened to you?
Yeah, I've definitely had really good partnerships. One of my partners in the real estate space, we have the best partnership I could have ever asked for. And I've had really bad partnerships, and a lot of times those things turn ugly, and it's um, not having experience, it's hard to tell what a good or a bad partnership is, right? At the beginning, it's like the honeymoon phase, everything's great. But, going through a few months together, you kind of quickly figure out the good, the bad, and, maybe this guy isn't the right partner. So, what I found is you want to have different skills, right? Like if two HVAC guys want to go into business to make a big HVAC company, that's probably not going to work, right? Because they're just always going to be stepping on each other's toes. But if you have an HVAC guy and maybe like an electrician or a plumber or, a finance guy, someone that can run the office, someone can run the field, that'll work out great because everyone's got their own lane, everyone sticks to it, and everyone has respect for whatever lane the other person's in. And it's actually a great partnership, right? There's obviously more that goes into it, but, that's kind of what I would say.
I think the yin and the yang work well, the opposites attract. So having a good operations person and maybe a good sales and marketing person come together, mm, they stay in their own lane and should. Someone's really good at finance and stay in that lane. Let the creative person stay in their lane. But if you're both, the best sales guy, you're gonna butt heads.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is too, it's the drive and motivation, like someone's energy and drive could be at a 10, the other person's could be at a 2. Those aren't gonna work, right? Because the person at a 10 is always running through walls. That's how I am, right? I'm always running through walls, and then if you got a number 2 that's just, you know, playing on their phone, playing with a pen, drawing a picture, like, "What are you doing, bro?" Like, let's run through walls, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, then you get resentment and you're like,
Exactly.
why are you here? And you are 50% of this organization and you're not pulling your weight. And that's often the issue where there's someone stronger than the other one, and the stronger one begins to resent the one that's not. And the one that's not's like, well, my kid's sick, so I won't be in until 1. Um, yeah, my wife planned this vacation. It's 3 weeks. So we're gonna be what? I mean 3 weeks? We just started this business 6 months ago. You crazy? Yeah,
Right.
well, you're not married, I am, so. So and so it's really challenging. Tio, we could talk forever. I really appreciate you coming onto the program. Thank you so much. Any parting words for the people who are listening who wanna learn more about growing their home service business?
I would say the first thing is, kinda looking out there and figuring out that there's a lot of things that you don't know, and there's a lot of people that have already gone through those things, and that could help you. And, you don't have to be in, like, no man's land, right, where you're just going through it yourself. There's other operators or groups like HSF or, people, resources out there to, kinda help out so you're not business is fun, right? Like, I think business is fun, and to have a good business, I think you're having the most fun, right? Granted, it's challenging, but why not have it be a great experience, not something that you're just, hitting your head against the wall? So, go out there and find the right resources that can help you achieve what you're looking to do.
I totally agree. Well, I hope to see you at the next Home Service Freedom event.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Teo. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jim. You do the same. Appreciate you.